afternoon. Yeah, it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. I've been looking forward to doing this presentation. I am an attorney here in Michigan. I specialize in estate planning, elder law, um, probate law, all of that good stuff. And I enjoy doing it. It's work that I enjoy doing. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about wills, trusts, and Medicaid to a degree. We're going to talk mostly about Medicaid itself and dig into that because I know that that's what I was asked to do. So I spend a lot of time working with people who are caregivers for family members or friends.
Mhm.
And very often, the idea, the
Right.
concept, the need for the state to cover the cost of their care becomes
Mhm.
a thing. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about Medicaid and how Medicaid works in general. And then I'm going to dig in. But before that, I'm going to look kind of lay a little groundwork for everything. Now, I do want you all to ask questions. You all can just start putting stuff in the chat now, and you'll see in a couple of slides. There's a slide where I'll ask specifically 4 questions. And there'll be a list of things that'll come up on that slide just for you to get your mind, your juices flowing around what you hope I answer today. But in a little time that we have together, let's talk about wills, trusts, and Medicaid, and let's dig in. So lawyers always have a disclaimer at the beginning because we're the people who sue people. So we don't want you to sue us. So we always say at the beginning, nothing that I share here is legal advice. All right. So none of you are my clients that I can see. Um, and so I'm not giving, there's no attorney-client relationship. The information I'm sharing is true and accurate. However, it's not legal advice. In order for me to give you legal advice about what you're dealing with, I would have to meet with you directly and meet with you in particular and get an idea of your circumstances and situations. Beyond that, though, nothing I'm sharing here now is legal advice, though it is good information. What I hope to accomplish in this time is give you good information. I have a lot of people have a lot of bad ideas about what needs to happen. Oh, we got to spend down, and oh, it's 5-year rule, right? And oh, you can't add anything to your name or anything. They have a lot of ideas when it comes to state planning in general, but also certainly when it comes to long-term care planning and in particular Medicaid stuff. So I want to give you good information that'll help you move forward in the way that's best for you in your situation or the situation involving your family member, loved one, friend, whoever it is in your world while you're here, or yourself. If you're trying to plan ahead for a potential Medicaid need, then simplify and enjoy the process. This stuff is oftentimes not fun to talk about. And so I want to make sure that we're able to talk about it in a way that won't leave people depressed and everything, but hopefully be somewhat enjoyable. And hopefully it'll be easy or simple to understand. That's my goal for right now. And of course, like I said, let's make sense of Medicaid. I see you all putting stuff in the chat already. So hopefully these are questions. Yep, I see them here. Good, good. So just keep putting them in the chat. I'll answer them. I'll save them for the end unless I see them pop up and can work it into the presentation itself. So this is a formal presentation, but my style is informal. So just pop the questions in the chat. Let's go and we'll dig in. Now, as we're talking about all of this stuff, I always got to start with questions, like I said. So I highlighted a few things that might be particularly applicable to this presentation today. So any of these things on these lists are kind of relevant to the overall Medicaid discussion, but certainly long-term care, special needs planning, and asset protection. So why is it that you were on here? What burning question do you have that you don't have to pay me to answer right now? Thanks to Jewish Family Services, and I'm super grateful to them for putting this on. But we're just talking, and I'm gonna share with you what I know and answer as many questions as I can. Just start dropping them in the chat right now so that we can dig into it. What I'm gonna do is show you how Medicaid works, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So the presentation portion may not take a lot of time because I want to make sure I open it up to answer the questions that you have. Now, when we get into estate planning, when we get into long-term care planning, in my mind, in my world, there's two sides to the planning. There's a pre-planning, planning in case you ever need Medicaid and long-term care. But then there's a I need it right now planning, and we're going to do that on the back end. For now, for the pre-planning component, I think everybody, even if you're on here because you're caring for somebody else, I want you to consider these questions not only for them, but also for yourself. And I say these questions in nearly every presentation that I do. I think that these two questions are two of the four most important questions everybody will deal with in one way or another in their lifetime. First, What happens to your assets or your children if you're gone? So yeah, we're talking about planning for Medicaid, long-term care and how Medicaid can work into that. But also even that planning involves what happens when you're gone. And certainly even before we have a need for long-term care, I think everybody 18 years old and older should consider this question and do something about it right now. And at this time in my life, I know it's my purpose to help people think about these questions and help them do something about it right now. So once again, if you think about whatever you own, no matter how much or how little, when you think about your family, your loved ones, your children, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, what would happen to all that stuff? And then the person that you're caring for, if you think about them and if they were gone, do you have things in place to make, does that person have things in place to make sure things will happen in the way that they should whenever that person passes? So, yeah, we can talk about Medicaid and we're going to get into that pretty heavily, but this is even more important than that, making sure all of that is taken care of in the right kind of way. The second question is equally important, and that's if you couldn't make decisions for yourself. And again, think about it for you as well as for the person you're caring for. I know a lot of times when we're helping somebody else, we say, oh, well, I'll deal with mine later. Right now, the urgent need is this person. Well, I think the urgent need is both. I think they're equally urgent. And so if you suddenly couldn't make decisions for yourself tomorrow, who would make decisions for you? And what would they decide? Now, some of you probably are in that situation where you're working with someone, supporting somebody who can't make decisions for them. And you may already know the challenges involved if they didn't have the right kind of material in place, or you may know the benefit of the tools that they do have in place that are allowing you to handle business for them. The point is, all of us, if we have capacity today, need to make a decision about this and move on putting the proper tools in place so that you can empower somebody at that point in time. When we look at the numbers, according to this study by caring.com, only one-third of people have any kind of plan in place. I know it says a will, but the will is general. It kind of encompasses, at least when I say it in this context, all of the documents. If they don't have a will, they probably also don't have powers of attorney. So the majority of people don't have a plan in place that addresses those questions correctly. And that's trouble. That's a problem. 7 out of 10 people don't have a plan in place that properly addresses those questions. And what happens in my world is I get the call when the crisis hits, and we either no longer can address it because of the crisis, or we're scrambling to address it at the last minute. And both of those cases are stressful and not enjoyable. So we got to get in front of it at a time that we can handle it in good timing and take care of that right now. That's the goal. That's the purpose. That's why the Jewish Family Services wanted to put this on. That's why I'm willing to join with them and make sure we talk about it. So, and that's the thing. We got to make sure we take the time to talk about it. Now, a complete estate plan is what everybody should have in place. Now, does everybody need all of this? No, but everyone needs to have a discussion to see what from this list they do need. Everybody 18 and up should have numbers 2, 3, and 4 that's on the screen. Most people, in my experience, who come into my office end up wanting numbers 1 through 4. And then many people will end up needing some of these things that are on the right side of the screen: long term care insurance, Medicaid coverage, some form of Medicaid trust. We'll get into this stuff, and then special needs trust as well. Let's look at numbers 3 and 4 on this circle here. The power of attorney is the tool that everybody 18 and up, I don't need to know anything about what you own. I can tell you if you have capacity, you should put a power of attorney in place today. Um, Start that process now. That's the tool where you're giving somebody authority to handle money, property, business, activity for you if you're alive and need or want somebody to. Now, the law in Michigan just changed on powers of attorney, and as of a year ago, July 1st, um, any powers of attorney created before that, they still can work, but they should be updated, in my opinion, so that they can kind of more directly comply with the law that governs powers of attorney, the Uniform Power of Attorney Act. Similarly, number 4 is the healthcare power of attorney. Again, everybody 18 and up should have that in place. That's where you're appointing somebody to make medical decisions for you, caregiving decisions, living decisions for you, without them having to go to court to get guardianship. By the way, number 4 is what should and could eliminate the need for somebody getting guardianship for you. Number 3 is what could and should eliminate the need for somebody to get conservatorship over you, whereas they ask the court to allow them to handle money. It's not a fun process. Now, the will and the trust are tools that are used primarily for after you're gone. Trust also can be used while you're alive, but generally, just as a basic, at a basic level, they're used after you're gone. That will is the tool where you're identifying who you want to handle the distribution of your assets after you're gone, number one, and who you want to get the assets after you're gone. The trust generally is for the same purpose. What's the difference between the two? The difference between a trust and a will at a fundamental level is probate court. So if you want your family to stay out of probate court after you're gone, the will is not the tool that you want to use. You want to use a trust. That's its purpose. You got to build the trust correctly. You have to properly connect your assets to the trust. In my opinion, I wouldn't recommend anybody to do that without a true estate planning attorney helping. But those two tools are used for that purpose. Now, when we're talking about Medicaid, and I'll circle back to this later, a trust and a will can both be very beneficial as we're planning for Medicaid, depending on your current situation. If we're dealing with somebody who, because typically we want to stay out of probate court, right? But sometimes if somebody needs long-term care and they're needing Medicaid to cover the cost, probably sending assets, and I'm not digging all deep into this right now, but sending assets to probate court could help them remain eligible. I don't want to dig into that right now. Just know that you really want to sit down with an elder law attorney who can really look at your situation to help you determine if a trust or a will is the better tool given your current circumstances. But generally speaking, without question, a trust is a better tool. Now, when we talk about long-term care insurance or Medicaid coverage, all that stuff, and then right after this, we're going to get into the Medicaid stuff, y'all. I always encourage people while they're able and not in need of long-term care to talk to an insurance agent about long-term care insurance. And the reason is because if you ever find yourself in a position where you need long-term care, you really, really, really wish you had long-term care insurance at that time. And what it is insurance that covers some portion, if not all, of the cost of your long-term care, and many times can eliminate the need for Medicaid coverage. Or secondarily, it can supplement the need for Medicaid, meet the need and use for Medicaid coverage. So that is something, it's pretty expensive. I will tell you, long-term care insurance is pretty expensive because right now the average cost of nursing home care is about $8,000 a month in Michigan. So that insurance, you're trying to have that cover that, it's probably going to be a little pricey for an insurance product, but it's a good tool. I have a long-term care insurance policy myself. I pay about $250 a month for that policy, and I'm good with it. All right, let's dig into the Medicaid stuff. So when we talk about long-term care and we talk about Medicaid and assisted living and all of that, how does it work? How does Medicaid, I'm sorry, how does Medicaid work? And I'm going to distinguish between the two in a second. So if someone is in need of skilled nursing care, let's just talk specifically about that. Their need for nursing home level care. There are multiple ways to pay for it. The first, of course, is private pay, right? If you have the money to pay for that long-term care, then you pay for it. The benefit and advantage of that is if you have enough money, then you can pay for the level of service that you want, the quality of service that you want. Unfortunately, well, you get what you pay for typically. And in my experience, it's the same thing in many cases when it comes to long-term care. Depending on what you can afford determines the quality of your care oftentimes. And that's a whole potential debate. But from what I've seen, that's the case. The more expensive, probably, possibly the better the facility and the care. And that may be a sad commentary, who knows, but it just is what it is at this point. But private pay is one option. Secondly, long-term care insurance, like I just talked about. That insurance, I've had multiple clients who have long-term care insurance policies, and they or their spouse, one client in particular I'm thinking about from years back, he had a pretty healthy long-term care insurance policy, and his wife ended up developing dementia pretty heavily. She was still super smart, so she was kind of gaming the test. So She still was sort of being diagnosed as having capacity because she could figure the tests out, but she didn't. She couldn't take care of herself. She couldn't do a lot of things because she couldn't remember how. She didn't understand how. And so, fortunately, at some point, well, not fortunate that she needed nursing care, but she ended up needing to be placed in a nursing facility. And fortunately for them, they did have a long-term care insurance policy, and it covered probably 75% of the cost of her skilled nursing care. And then he supplemented the rest. And ultimately, we ended up applying for Medicaid. Medicaid covered what was left over after the long-term care insurance and their own personal income. That'll make more sense when we get to how Medicaid works. The last thing is what we're talking about. All right. So, asking and applying for the government to provide care to cover the cost of the care that's being provided for the person. So, the VA for veterans, they have their own facilities and they can cover some, if not all, of the cost of their care. And then, of course, purpose of today, Medicaid. Medicaid is a state governed managed resource that's available. Let's get more into that now. So let's talk about Medicaid. Medicaid is managed by Michigan by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Now it's a federal program that's administered through each state individually, and each state has its own Medicaid program. So they have each state has its own twists on how they roll it out and what their individual qualifications are. I'm going to be talking more specifically about the Michigan program this year, of course, because we are in Michigan. It's core eligibility, benefit requires those requirements are set on a federal level, but the state, as I said earlier, administer it, and they have different ways that they roll out the administration of those benefits. Now, of course, all of this currently is being challenged. It's a huge discussion on the Hill and in Washington, and there's debates back and forth. And every presidential campaign that I can remember, this has been a conversation, and some are talking about cutting Medicaid altogether. Others are talking about that's ridiculous and we shouldn't. Why would we cut off a resource that's available for people who need it? And that's a debate. And I'll let you decide where you want to fall on that debate. I love this Medicaid program. I think it's a great tool, and I'm hoping that it's not cut because I have a lot of clients that are on it, and some clients that are going to be applying for it soon because they need it. So that's just another thought. So Medicaid or Medicare, what is the difference? People call me and they say, well, I have that. Actually, I just met with four older women yesterday. I was meeting with a family in Flint, family of sisters, and they were all 70 plus years old. I think the oldest one there was 84. And I started talking about Medicaid. She said, well, I have that. I have Medicare. I said, I'm not talking about Medicare. I'm talking about Medicaid. So what's the difference between the two? So Medicare eligibility is for people 65 and older. It's really health insurance. People of any age who have kidney failure, long-term kidney disease, and people who are currently disabled and cannot work. You can apply for Medicare, and in some ways you get it almost automatically. And it's really a health insurance. That's how I like to frame it. It's not all that it does, but it's really health insurance. So then what is Medicaid? Medicaid is typically for people who are low income, pregnant women, children under 19, and you see the list here. People are disabled, people who need nursing home care. That's really what I'm going to focus on today. Medicaid for people who need skilled nursing care. So typically, Medicaid is available for purposes of this discussion for people who cannot afford to cover the cost of their own long-term care. All right, that's the scope of the rest of this presentation. Now, there is a place where you can be eligible for both. You can be on Medicare for your health care, which is often those that are above 65, while also needing the state to cover the cost of those other expenses that aren't your health care, but they're your living situation and your physical therapy or your just care in general. So not necessarily covering the cost of your diabetes management, but definitely covering the cost of someone helping you get dressed, helping you eat, making sure you have a place to sleep, and those types of things. That's that dual eligibility. between Medicare and Medicaid. All right, how do you qualify for Medicaid? Now, many of us hear this $2,000 in total assets rule, right? And it's very true, right? Medicaid restricts the amount of money that you can have in assets, the amount of assets that you can have in the event that you need the state to cover your costs. Now, when you think about it, that's taxpayer money. So there needs to be rules around how, when, and if you're able to receive that benefit that the taxpayers are paying for. So there needs to be somebody, some place that kind of manages the rollout of Medicaid. And we got to have some rules around it. Otherwise, everybody would ask for the government to pay for it. And right now, we're not set up for that to be able to occur. There are some places that are around our world, but we're not set up in that way where we cover the cost of anybody who needs long-term care. So if you are asking the state to cover it, here's what you got to do. There are really three tests that you have to pass in order to qualify for Medicaid. The first test is not on here, but it's the do you really need it test. That really is settled once we have a doctor. The way I try to get that settled when I'm helping somebody apply for Medicaid is by getting a doctor to write a letter saying, yeah, this person has dementia, this person has no use of his or her legs and cannot take care of the majority of his or her activities of daily living, and therefore does need skilled nursing care. A letter just like that from the doctor helps us jump the hurdle of the first test, the do I need it in the first place test. Now, once it's determined that you do need skilled nursing care, we roll into the second and third tests, which are pretty much the rest of this presentation, right? The second one is the do I have enough assets to cover it test. And if you have more than $2,000 in total assets, the answer is yes, and you're automatically disqualified or ineligible for Medicaid because Medicaid feels that you can cover it. Even if you're $1 over that $2,000 number, Medicaid is not going to qualify you. But as they're looking at your assets, they look at all, and by the way, let me say this, there are different type of Medicaid programs. There's the Medicaid waiver. There's several different types of that program. What I'm talking about specifically here is the skilled nursing uh, Medicaid program where you need nursing home level care. All right, that's what we're talking about for purpose of this. So if you $1 over, you're ineligible. In order for them to determine, now remember, we're not talking about income. That's going to be the third test. All right. The second test is an asset test. And so there are some assets that they look at and they count to determine if you're ineligible. They count the value of them. And then there are some assets that they do not count as they're looking to see if you have more than $2,000 in assets. Let's first look at the assets that are counted. Any assets like this are going to be counted against you for purposes of Medicaid determination. The first is any cash that you have at home in a safe, any bank accounts and credit unions accounts, CDs, money markets, all of that kind of stuff. The value of those accounts will be counted, period. If your name is on it, it's going to be counted, including if you're on somebody else's account as a joint owner. When I do my broad presentation about wills and trusts altogether, I always have a whole section where I talk about joint ownership. And one of the last bullets, because there are other issues to consider, why joint ownership often is a bad idea. One of the final bullets that I put in there is it can impact your Medicaid application. So let's say that you are joint on your mom's account and that there is, $50,000 in that account or just 10 in that account, and that's all your mom's money. You're going to have to report that on the Medicaid application. And if you don't, they consider you lying to them, and that's a problem. You're going to have to report that on the application, and Medicaid is going to disqualify you, even though that's her money, unless you do a deeper dive explanation of that money, which is something that you could do, and you'd have to prove that that's really not your money at all. Your mom just had you on there. So keep that in mind before you go adding somebody as a joint owner, and certainly before you allow somebody to add you as a joint owner. Keep that in mind. All cash, all bank accounts, CDs, money markets, all of that stuff is going to be counted for against you dollar for dollar. IRA, stocks, bonds, 401ks, all of that stuff is also going to be counted against you. So if you have more than 2,000, and remember, this $2,000 number is collective. It's all of this stuff in aggregate, right? So total. So IRA stocks, bonds are counted against you. Watch this. Your life insurance, the cash surrender value of your life insurance is also going to be counted against you. Now, if you have a regular term life insurance policy, that's not that's not going to be counted against you. If, however, you have like a whole life policy and you have a cash surrender value of that policy, you're going to have to report that to them. Anything over $1,500 in cash surrender value is going to be counted against you. Here's an easy way to remember what's counted against you. Medicaid is basically saying if you have some money to pay the bill, you should pay the bill. We don't want to pay your bill if you actually have some money to pay it. So if you have any money from any source that's beyond any assets beyond $2,000 that are counted, they're going to be counted against you. And certainly if it's cash just sitting somewhere, we need to know. Don't try to hide it from us. We need to know. And we're going to count it against you. A vacation home, a second car, a boat, the equity in a boat that you have, any property other than your home, the value of all of that stuff is meaning real property, meaning land, is going to be counted against you for purposes of Medicaid. Now, what some people do when they see this is they immediately say, okay, well, that's what I'm gonna do. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. I had a client, had a lawyer friend. He and I went to law school together. He was a genius. He is a brilliant attorney. I still work with him from here and there on occasion. He did a power of attorney for a woman, giving her nephew authority to manage business for her, handle bank accounts and all of that. Well, the aunt ended up needing long-term care, and the nephew was going to apply for Medicaid. Instead of calling an attorney, he decided he wanted to do it on his own. He knew that she couldn't have more than 2,000. There was something like $100,000 in his bank account. He, using the power of attorney, he transferred that money out of that account and put it into an account in his name alone. Well, he then applied for Medicaid and got disqualified. And when it came back, it's because Medicaid discovered that first of all, he told them that he moved the money, but they would have found it anyway, that he moved the money from her account to his name using the power of attorney. And they said, no, that's her money. So what's the point of that? You don't want to just start moving money around if you know you're going to apply for Medicaid because they're going to ask about that. And you got to tell them the truth. Otherwise, you get not only get disqualified, but they come for you if you lie on that application and they do discover where the money is. You don't want to do that. You want to meet with an attorney who does this work so that they can then properly move assets around. We were able to move her assets around within the rules because we know the rules and we were able to get her qualified, but we had to clean up all that he did first. And then we had to tell Medicaid that he did that because he wasn't trying to do anything wrong. He thought he was okay, but he wasn't. You can't do that kind of thing. But these things on the left side of the page are the countable assets. And you want to be careful what you do. It's best to consult with an attorney who does this work in particular, so they can help you identify the assets and the values that will be counted against her and then also help you move them in the right kind of way. Now, these are the assets that are counted, but there's a whole list of assets that don't count against you for Medicaid purposes. And these are what's called excluded assets. So watch this. Your primary residence, the main place where you live, the value of your residence is not counted against you, caveat, as long as the equity is under a certain figure. I think for single people, it's like $650,000. I think maybe for married couples, I'd have to look it up. It's a bit more than that. But for single individuals, if the equity in your home is above 650,000, then whatever is beyond that 650,000 number um, is um, is counted against you. While I'm talking, I'm gonna try to look up the updated number for that funeral and burial policy down there. Clothing, jewelry, home furnishing, all of that stuff is is not counted against you. Oh, let me back up to the property. Any property connected to your residence, so even if it's a separate parcel and not all one deed, but you own the lot right next door to your home, and it literally is right next door. There's no split between the two, no property in between that you don't own. Then the value of that is not counted against you as well, or either. One car, you can own one car as well, and um, still be eligible for Medicaid if you start getting a second and third car and all of that, even if your son drives it or any of that kind of stuff. then you are in trouble. So yeah, so it looks like that life insurance number is still about the same. All right, so and then any property that you're unable to sell. So let's say you do own a second property that's not contiguous to your residence, and you have tried to sell it for a period of time, 90 days, you tried a year or two, and you just couldn't sell it for some reason. Nobody would buy it. Then you can let Medicaid know that because you tried to turn it into money to cover your care and you just couldn't. And so they then will not count that additional property against you, but you got to prove that you did try to do that. So this is test number two. You can't have more than $2,000 in assets. They're going to count all cash that you have. They're going to count all IRAs and all of that. They're going to count the cash surrender value of your life insurance policy and any additional property, vehicles, all of that that you own. They're not going to count your residence or any property that is directly connected to your residence property. None of these household furnishings and jewelry and things. One car doesn't count. Now, if you go out and buy, you're trying to get eligible because you can. One of the tools that you can, one of the tricks that you can do to get rid of money legally within the rules is to buy a car if you don't have one. Now, if you go out and buy a Lamborghini, or a car like the Beast that the car that the president drives in, something like that, they're going to disqualify you. You can go out and buy $150,000 car, right? However, one car you can purchase, and then another thing is you can purchase your burial costs, your funeral and burial policy, but it's capped on the value of that. So this is the second test. Now, the third test, once you've passed the yes, I need it test, the doctor wrote the note saying, yep, they need it. And then you've passed the asset test, which is the trickiest of the three, in my opinion, to pass. This is where we really do our work when we're trying to get you qualified. That guy I talked about earlier had the long-term care policy. His wife was gaming the system and ended up needing nursing home care, and she got it, but then we still had to apply for Medicaid. He had something like $400,000 in an IRA. And yes, they do count your spouse's assets against you. It's a collective thing if you're married, even if you're separated. If you're still legally married, then your spouse's assets do also count against you. That number is $3,000 instead of 2,000 for a married couple, but they do count it against you still. He had about almost $400,000 in an IRA. And so we had to, within the rules, move that money in a way that would allow her to still be qualified. And we were pretty successful in doing that. Again, this is where the real heavy lifting of our work occurs. Because most, not most people, a lot of people, a good number of people have more than $2,000 in countable assets. And so we have to know the rules so that we can move assets in the right kind of way within the rules to get them under those numbers. Let's look at the third test. We've passed test one. We've moved assets appropriately according to the rules to pass test two. Now let's look at test three. This is the income test. So Medicaid says, okay, we see you don't have assets that could be liquidated for purposes of your care, but what about your income? And here's how it works. Medicaid first says, okay, what is the cost of the nursing facility where you're going? So you're going to Acme Nursing, and Acme Nursing charges $8,000 a month. Okay, so we got that. Now, next, we're going to look at what is your total income. When we look at your Social Security, your pension, maybe you're getting required minimum distributions from an IRA, all of it. You got, maybe you have a rental property that couldn't sell, and that's getting tricky. That probably wouldn't work, but let's just say it. And let's say you have $9,000 coming in. The cost of the facility is 8,000. Your total income is $9,000 a month. The difference is what Medicaid would pay. And in that scenario that I just gave you, there is no difference. You have more income than the cost of the facility. So they're not going to approve you. You're going to be ineligible. However, let's say the cost of a nursing facility is $8,000. Let's say your total income from various sources is $4,000. Medicaid is going to cover the other $4,000. And there's some twists and turns on that rule, but just generally speaking, that's how that works. If you're in a situation where where your income is less than the cost of the facility, and you've already passed test one and test two, Medicaid will then say, yep, we'll cover it. And they will for as long as that's the case. They do allow you, so they do take all of your income, by the way, minus $60. They give you $60 so you can go to Chick-fil-A or something, get some food sometimes. So that's how that works. You have the do you need it test, you have the asset test, and you have the income test. Now, I think what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about just how we manage this, and then I'm going to open it up for questions because it looks like I'm finishing pretty close to my time. See there? Um, so what would I do if I was working with somebody, and actually I am right now, I have a family member right now who may need nursing home care coming up, and we probably are going to need to apply for Medicaid for her because she doesn't have a lot of assets. So we're going to have to look at this. We're going to first have to get a note from the doctor saying that she is unable to handle business. Now, if she didn't have capacity, then hopefully she had done a power of attorney where she gave somebody authority to make these decisions for her. And hopefully that power of attorney was done by somebody who understands Medicaid. So they buried in that power of attorney provisions that will be valuable at this time, like the right to move money around and maybe the right to gift assets to his or herself. You got to be careful with that. But for Medicaid purposes, that might be a tool that we need. So, but nonetheless, let's say that she does have capacity so she can sign all this stuff on her own. All right, the next thing we're going to need to do is get all the statements, all the banking statements, all of the asset information, current asset information. So then we can look to do our own calculation to see where she lands with those assets. Does she have enough to cover? Is she beyond the $2,000 number? And how does that work? For married couples, there's an extra step. Even if only one of them needs it, we also have to go back, and I'm not going to go too deep in this because we don't have time. We have to go back to a date that the spouse that needs nursing care first went into a facility and was in there for 30 plus days. In which case, this case scenario I'm giving you, she was in there for 30 plus days. And the reason is because we have to see what the value of their assets were at the beginning of that 30-day period. Don't worry about that right now. Just know right now you want to talk to an attorney who understands how to do this stuff because this stuff is super complex, and most attorneys who even do estate planning won't do it. So we're going to look at all the statements, all the assets to see the value of the assets, and then we're going to have to determine how we can move assets around within the rules, within what Medicaid allows to get her qualified for Medicaid. And assuming we can do that, which typically we can, um, we'll move to the income test, which is here on the screen, and we'll talk about, we'll look to see if her income is less than the cost of the facility. All of that is explained out very thoroughly in a Medicaid application, which should be about that thick, at least an inch thick. It depends on your assets and things, but oftentimes it's about that thick, where we're building the case for why the state should cover that cost. It is not as simple, in my opinion, as just going to somebody who says they can file that for you and get it filed. Because I'm going to tell you now, if your assets are over $2,000, or if you've moved assets within 5 years prior to the date of filing the application, that's what the 5 year rule is. If you've moved any assets, given anything away at all within 5 years prior to the date of filing your application, they're going to count that money against you as well. So you want to be very intentional and very strategic. Having said all of that, um, don't just assume that because your person has more than $2,000 that they cannot qualify for Medicaid. That is not true necessarily. You need to talk to an attorney who knows this stuff so that they then can look at your assets to see if it's worth it to try to apply. And basically, if you got $10 million, it's not going to be worth it, right? But if you're less than that, significantly less than that, it probably is. It's not only for people who only have $5,000 to their name. They definitely should be able to get qualified with the right movement. But everyday middle aged people potentially can as well if you work with somebody who knows the rules. So I'm gonna actually stop there. Real quick, this is just a place. I'm gonna open up for questions right now. If you scan this QR code, that'll take you to a place on my site. If you have more questions, want to set time to talk with me about it, that'll take you to a place on my website where you can where you can do that. Schedule some time with me. Also, if you're interested, there's a book. If you scroll to the very bottom of the page that this QR code brings you to, the very, very, very bottom of that page, there's a book on there that just breaks down wills, trust, probate, powers of attorney, and some long-term care. It's my book that I put out. Pretty proud of that. Put out last year, I think it was, and it'll give you some really good information. So just scan that QR code, and then we will go from there. I'm going to open it up for questions. I think I'll start by just digging into um, the chat here and see what I can see. What questions are here? Um, all right, here we go. What is spin down and what does that mean? Hey, great question. So, in the Medicaid world, spending down is really just getting rid of assets, getting rid of the assets that you have so you can get under that $2,000 number. And it's necessary to do if you have more than $2,000 in assets or three for a married couple. It's necessary to do, but you don't want to just start giving stuff away. You want to do it within the rules, which is I can't express this enough. You want to do it within the rules, which is why it's important to use somebody who truly does this work because they know the rules and they know what will not be flagged as a problem by Medicaid once you do that. So one of the tricks, and I'm gonna go deep for a second, you also just hang with me. One of the tricks and tools that we use, I use this for the man I told you about whose wife went to the facility and they had long-term care insurance. So he had almost $400,000 in a, and you're gonna have to hang with me to understand this, in this IRA. And so I knew immediately they were gonna get disqualified because of that. So what we did, we used an annuity, and you got to be super careful about this. Um, and we split the money. We took half of the money in that IRA and he liquidated it. So he had to pay a penalty. Not a penalty. He was got taxed on that money. We took half of it and we gifted that money to his daughter. And then we put the other half of it into an annuity. Now, why do we do that? Because Medicaid allows us to. So what we did was we created an ineligibility for his wife. So because we transferred money from him and out of their name to their daughter, that violates Medicaid rules. You can't do that if it's done within 5 years. Remember, I said that earlier. So what they do when you do that is they count that money against you for however long that money could have paid your Medicaid expenses. So $200,000 at $8,000 a month, I'm not going to do that math now, but however many months that $200,000 would have covered her nursing home care, she Medicaid was not going to use any taxpayer money for that, which is why we put the other half into an annuity. And it's a very specialized kind of annuity that Medicaid will allow. Again, I told you I'm going deep. Just hang with me. This story be done in a second if I'm overwhelming anybody. And the purpose of that annuity is to cover the cost of her nursing care for that same amount of time. So if the 200,000 that was transferred could have covered her for however many months that is at $8,000 a month, we want that amount of money to be in an annuity that's going to cover the cost so Medicaid doesn't have to. So she's still qualified in that model. It's just Medicaid will not start paying for it until the other 200,000 that's in the annuity is spent. That's a spend down method. Now, that's real deep. I would almost say don't even ask questions about that because that's lawyer stuff. But that's an example of the type of things that we can do in order to help somebody get qualified. But again, things like buying the funeral and burial policy has to be a special kind of policy, special paperwork the funeral home has to give you. That's a spend down method. You can put money into repairing the house, the residence that they own, even though they're not going to live there because they're going to be in a nursing facility. You can put money into that. You definitely can pay off debt. That's another spend down tool. Use the cash that you have to pay off debt. There are a lot of steps like that that you can take to spend down. What you don't want to do, though, is just give money to somebody, and especially not a family member, unless you're using a special strategy that's designed to incorporate that. So, good question, great question. And the 5 year look back that everybody hears about, that is a spin down approach or a spin down idea. They only look back again to look at what you've done with your money over the 5 years leading up to the date of the application. Now, if you gave all your money away 10 years ago or 8 years ago and you're just now applying today, then it could work. Then they won't look at that. They don't want to know 60 months back. That 61st month doesn't matter. Is there a particular insurance company you recommend for long-term care insurance? No, not really. I would say talk to your financial advisor or your life insurance agent. They should be able to have a discussion. Most of the people, I'll say in my practice, I have a great relationship with a few agents. And most of the time, I send my clients to New York Life Insurance Company. They do not pay me to say that. And there are a couple of agents there that I have that I trust myself, because they're not going to just try to sell you something. They will really look at it and let you know what they think you should do. So, great question. What are CDs? A CD is a certificate of deposit. It's just a tool where you can grow money. Pays you a little bit higher interest than a regular checking or savings account. Typically, CDs, you're putting money away for a period of time that you agree on with the bank. And if you pull it back out before that time period is completed, then they penalize you. You pay a penalty because so you're putting your money away. They promise in 6 months you have this much interest added to your money, and it's going to be a higher percentage um, than if you were in a banking account or something. What's the difference between waiver and straight Medicaid? So Medicaid nursing care is really, it just covers the cost of your care in a nursing facility, or well, yeah. Now Medicaid, the waiver program is where they'll cover the cost of you being at home and having skilled nursing care at home or in a facility that's not home, like a community that's not designated as a Medicaid facility. Now, everybody wants the waiver, right? Which is why there's a very long wait list, always, because everybody would love to stay home and have someone come into their house that the state pays for than otherwise. And so the rules are very similar applying for the waiver. It's just there's a long um, uh, wait list to apply to get qualified for the waiver. What some people will do is go on Medicaid first, and people who are already on Medicaid in a nursing facility, I believe there's still an option for them to cut in line and get ahead of people who weren't on that wait list, and you might be able to, go home more immediately. So that's a good tool too, but you got to be willing to go into a facility first. Home not counted as asset for Medicaid. That's correct. Your home is not, the value of your home is not counted against you. Neither is your car. See the second question. Neither is your car, your one car that's in your name, for purposes of Medicaid, as long as it's not extravagant. So if you have $1 million in equity on your home, then they're going to count and you're single, they're going to count that, what, 350,000 above the $650,000 limit. They're going to count that against you. And then similarly, if you're driving a Rolls Royce, then they're probably not going to allow that to work. Can a house be on lot next door that I own for Medicaid eligibility? Sure. A house can be on it. Now, if you're renting the house and that's income, just remember that that income is going to count against you for purposes of the income test. But yeah, there can be a house on the lot next door as long as it is literally next door. If there's any break in your ownership between the two, they're going to count it's going to count against you. Can I repeat the insurance company? So I say really any life insurance company can work. The one I send my clients to a lot of the times, and this is not me, again, I don't get paid for them, at all. I often send my clients to New York Life Insurance Company just because I have a real healthy relationship with some agents there, and I have for years. And those agents that I use have serviced my clients very well consistently um, over time. All right, so you're on your phone and you can't connect the QR code. Just go to TQuinn. Here, I put it in the chat. Just go to tquin25.com and that will, or Chelsea, can you put the website that they should go to? Can you put that in the chat for me? Um, so that they can have that if you're there, Chelsea. There we go. tquin25.com. See if you can find the one that the second QR code goes to that you sent today. and put that um, in the chat because that'll send them to the other page. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Let's see how we doing on time. I think we're about out of time. I think we have like 5 more minutes. Is that right? Question time. All right, you all. 5 more minutes. You get charged after this. So you want to ask your questions now while it's still free.
Okay.
What else can I answer for about Medicaid, long-term care, wills, trust, any of that stuff? Type fast. Type fast. We're gonna close it out soon.
Terrence, I have a question. So all these rules, they're so difficult to understand. Why do they make them so hard for the normal person to be able to appreciate?
Probably because they just don't want everybody applying. Now, truthfully, I think it's because so I don't know is the first answer, but I will say that um, they have to make it strict and specific so that people don't game the system. I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? So we want to make sure people aren't just applying and taking advantage. That's really what I mean, taking advantage of the system in an inappropriate way. So, the rules are designed to make sure you're telling us the truth. Us meaning the government. I'm not the government. Make sure you're telling the truth about everything and to make sure you really do need the taxpayers to pay for your long-term care. I think it's a great program. I think it's extremely beneficial because a lot of people would not be able to be cared for. And we're aging as a country. We're aging for sure. And there is a healthcare crisis in our country. And this isn't political, I'm just talking about the facts. And we have a lot of people. The baby boomers are largest group of people here, period, ever, right? And so they're approaching an age where they're going to need this, and we do not have enough space for them. In facilities are going up like crazy. So if anybody's looking for a way to build business and make money, go into long-term care facilities because they're going up like crazy because we can't accommodate everybody. So we got to make sure that the people, I would guess that part of the purpose for the complexity of the rules is we got to make sure that the people who are applying truly do need it. And so, but I will say you're right that it is super complex. A lot of lawyers won't touch this stuff. I think I said that earlier. Even the state planning attorneys, even though this is really a byproduct of estate planning, they won't touch this because frankly, you're getting rid of all of somebody's assets within the rules so they can apply. And if Medicaid says no for a reason that you didn't understand, they don't have any assets, they're going to be pretty mad at you because you can't get them back once you give them away. And so you just want to make sure you use somebody who knows what they're doing. It's a great question. Let's see how
Yeah,
did I
and
do?
one last question from me, if nobody else has any. You said 650 is the exclusion for a home. So there is a cap on what your home can be worth before they
Yeah,
start tapping it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there certainly is. There certainly is a cap on what it can be worth. So, so and that maybe that's another tool, but then that's money that you have in the bank. I was gonna say maybe take out a loan, but then what are you gonna do with the money? Right? And that money that's in the bank from the loan is going to count against you. So um, but yeah, for a single person it's $650,000 in equity behind the mortgage. Great questions. Well, I think if there are no other questions,
How much do
I
you
think
charge?
how much do I charge?
Yeah.
It's always a great question. For Medicaid planning, like
Yes.
you're talking about if somebody needs to apply for Medicaid,
Yes.
yeah, that's a pretty significant cost. And that cost, by the way, is a spin down mechanism, right? So your lawyer bill, lawyers probably wrote this rule, but your lawyer bill for doing that also is not counted against you. It's not money that's been moved. So, an average rate of a nursing care monthly cost is within the range of what an attorney will charge for something like that. So it's case by case to a degree. But if you just think of that, that average rate is about $8,000 or so. So something like that. Now, sometimes people had like say the person has dementia, and so they can't make decisions for themselves, and they had not done the estate planning, so they don't have a power of attorney in place. We can't even file the application, and we can't move the assets around without having authority. So we might first have to go to court to get appointed as guardian or conservator, so that then a conservator, then we can access the assets and manage everything. So that'll make it more. So it's case by case. But if you look at the average cost of a nursing facility right now, monthly cost, it's probably going to be at least that amount.
Okay. One last question, because with the power of attorney, who is that, the guardian, which one can overpower the power of attorney? If you have guardianship or conservator?
Great question. Yeah, great question. So yeah, the strongest authority you can have is over somebody else is a court appointed authority. So guardianship and conservatorship can and will often trump a power of attorney. Power of attorney is a great authority. Everybody should have it because it should eliminate the need of guardianship and conservatorship. But if there becomes a need for that, even though there's a power of attorney, it definitely trumps it.
Okay, so should you have both, or you could apply for both, or just one for guardianship or conservative?
Oh, you mean both guardianship or conservatorship? Not talking about powers of attorney.
No,
Yeah.
no. What you answered my question, but if you're going to trump the power of attorney, should you also have guardianship and conservative, or just one or the other?
Yeah, so lawyer's favorite term, favorite phrase, it depends. So, but it does depend, right? It depends on the circumstances. So, in some cases, so first of all, I try to help people avoid getting conservatorship as long as we can, because
Okay.
it's not a fun proceeding for anybody, including the conservator, because you have to report to the court every year, and it's a good thing to hold you accountable, but if one penny is off, even if it was by mistake, they throw the book at you if you don't show it. Um, However, if you need to manage their money and there's not another option to manage it, then you need to get conservatorship if you don't have it otherwise. And similarly, if
Okay.
you need to be able to make medical and housing and well-being decisions, and there's not another legal authority that you've been given, then yeah, you need to get that too. But very often people come in just because they want to be able to make decisions for the person, and we'll just apply for guardianship and just hold off on conservatorship for as long as we can until they absolutely need to be able to manage the money and don't have the right
Does
access to do so.
would having either of the three, if that person was to decease, are you responsible for any of their money owes, or like any debts or anything?
Once again, it depends. So
Um,
generally speaking, no. Generally speaking, no. Having power of attorney, guardianship, or conservatorship, you should, as long as you stayed within the rules, as long as you followed the rules, either court given rules or person given rules, then you should not be personally liable for any of their expenses when they're gone. Now, that's a Michigan thing. In other states, if you're related to the person, even if you never agreed to pay the bill, they can ask you to pay it. In Michigan, that's not the case. So, as long as you followed the rules, you should not be personally liable for any of their debt and expenses after they pass. Their assets are supposed to cover those costs if those assets are still in their name when they pass.
okay. Do you have, oh, I think I'm out of time. It's 1:03.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
Thank you
great
so much.
questions though. Yeah, my
Thank
pleasure. And I'll
you.
go back to that page just as we close it out. And I'm gonna be quiet in about 20 seconds. Go back to this page. Oh, actually in the chat, it says tquint25.com. So if anybody has more questions, you can go there and schedule some time for me, and
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk with you all. But thank you. Y'all been great. And I'm gonna be quiet now.
Thank you.
Oops.